I miss the MCU. And no, I'm not naive to the fact that it's still running. Believe me, I am well aware. Matter of fact, I still keep up with every new release and then buy the physical copies no matter how good, bad, or ugly. Why? Honestly, sometimes I don't know. Maybe it's the collector in me. Maybe it's the part of me wanting to show these studios that there's still a market for physical media. And maybe I still want to believe that Marvel movies can be good. Everyone and their brother has been making the same claim since 2021 when the MCU returned after its hiatus post Far From Home. The MCU died with Iron Man. Nothing's been good since Endgame. There's too much quantity, not enough quality. Disney went woke and ruined everything. I'm old enough to remember the early days of the MCU. Admittedly, I wasn't nearly as invested then as I would be later on. I saw the first two Iron Man movies on DVD because I originally had no idea what the first one was when it came out. When Iron Man 2 was coming out, I was really excited and wanted to go, but my mom said it wouldn't make any sense to see the second one without seeing the first. So eventually I got and watched the first film, but by that point, the second one had left the theater and I wouldn't see it until it too was on DVD. Thor was actually my first MCU film in theaters, followed by Captain America the First Avenger, and then the Avengers came along the following year to blow my mind and cement itself as my favorite film of all time to this day. And I actually didn't see The Incredible Hulk until I was in like 8th grade, but I remember how momentous everything had felt at that point. I was 10 years old, seeing all these superhero films being made, not realizing they were part of a bigger plan, and just grateful that I had these stories to grow up with. At the time, I wasn't reading comics, and my only real introduction to the wider Marvel Universe came from the Superhero Squad show. Seeing these characters being realized on the big screen was a huge deal for me. Everything in Phase 2 felt like an event. Back then, I wasn't following the media reports or film development so closely. The first time I saw the trailer for Iron Man 3, I didn't think it was real until the shot of Iron Man lying in the snow, beaten up, popping off the faceplate to reveal Robert Downey Jr.'s face underneath. My hunger for this film would not be satiated until May 2013. I'll admit, even as a 12-year-old kid who wasn't exactly an expert on Iron Man and the Mandarin's rivalry outside of a few videos I watched on YouTube to fill me in ahead of time, I was a bit disappointed by the third act reveal.
My name's Trevor Slattery. I am the Mandarin!
But I still was happy to see an Iron Man film for the first time in theaters. The following movies were great as well, continuing the stories of our favorite heroes and introducing us to new ones. And yes, I include Thor the Dark World in that statement as well. Even though it's not perfect, I still enjoy that movie. The more I delved into comics and the more these films came out, I was more and more excited for what they were planning. And the congruency of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agent Carter, Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, The Punisher, and The Defenders, all shows I kept up with, mind you, helped make it feel like something on the same level or bigger than Harry Potter and Star Wars. When Phase 3 was announced, I was in awe and could not wait for things to begin in 2016. They had a 4-year plan to culminate everything we had seen, introduce even more new heroes, and blow us away with the ultimate showdown against Thanos and the Infinity Gauntlet. Holy crap, this was a childhood dream come true. Then Spider-Man got added in and everything felt even more perfect. Of course, we still didn't have the X-Men or Fantastic Four yet, but I was willing to accept what we had and not take it for granted. But something changed in 2017 when I saw the first movie in this franchise that just didn't work for me. Thor Ragnarok. I know, how dare I not share the same opinion with everyone else. The first time I saw it, I was really happy with it, but then again, I was 17 and just 1 year prior, I thought Suicide Squad was a good movie. But the more I sat on it, the more I thought about how it poorly adapted the story of Planet Hulk, one of my favorite Marvel comics, how it turned Thor from a god of thunder to a thundering buffoon, how the Hulk was also turned into a joke, how characters suddenly started summoning random powers they never had before, how they killed off side characters I actually enjoyed, how they basically took a wrecking ball to the Thor franchise and completely... Okay, no. Tangent for another time. But regardless, I saw a Marvel film for the first time that just didn't sit well with me, but the ending set up Infinity War and I was still riding a Marvel high, so who cares? 4 months later, Black Panther came out and the discourse around it was beyond divisive. There were people on one side saying this was a movie made to pander to black people and is nothing but a woke agenda-pushing narrative. And the other side was saying this is a perfect movie and if you don't like it, you're a racist. For the first time ever, a Marvel movie was the litmus test for political ideology, and that's the last thing I ever wanted from this superhero franchise. But again, none of that mattered because Infinity War was next, and I will never forget the anxiety and dread I felt walking into that theater. A good anxiety and dread, mind you. I was terrified of what characters would get killed, what they would do narratively, and by the end, my jaw was on the floor. Wait, Thanos won? Half the universe is dead? Black Panther is dead? Spider-Man is dead? I checked my watch. Dude, you have literally a minute to undo all of directed by Anthony and Joe Russo.
What?
That year-long wait between Infinity War and Endgame was unreal. Previously, the longest I sat on a cliffhanger was between Deathly Hallows Part 1 in November 2010 and Deathly Hallows Part 2 in July 2011. Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel were just not enough to hold me over. Matter of fact, they made it worse. It's like a kid yearning for a slice of the best tasting cake in the world only to be given a plate full of stale bread and raisins. I can confidently say Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel were the first two times I left a Marvel film thinking, that was awful, what was even the point? Disney just cranked out these two to explain why Ant-Man wasn't in Infinity War and to establish Captain Marvel so that she can be in Endgame. These were chock full of annoying MCU humor, felt overly generic in what they were tackling, and were tone-deaf follow-ups to the most devastating ending to any superhero film ever. But screw it. Endgame is right around the corner, and that's the one that counts. And count it did. I know plenty of other people have their gripes with its story and choices. I have plenty myself. But Endgame was such a special event for me that I didn't care. It was 3 hours where I witnessed a love letter to the MCU and to comic fans in general. For the longest time, I was going into most MCU films assuming that Captain America would die. It started in Age of Ultron after the broken shield tease, then again in Civil War because that's how the comic ended. In Infinity War, he looked disheveled and had a beard, but he still survived. Endgame had to be it, right? When Thanos started swinging his sword down and destroying his shield, I thought, this is it. Cap's about to die. And no, I was very wrong, because shortly after, the cavalry comes in and the Avengers assemble. The most epic, grand scale charge into battle I've ever witnessed in a theater. And the battle ended in the way that I never even considered: Iron Man grabbing the stones and snapping himself. The moment that I saw him put his hand up after Thanos' failed snap, I just couldn't accept it. Wait, but that means, no, what? Iron Man was a constant in the MCU. He started it. Surely he'd have to be there as a recurring character in any future projects. I mean, there's a Spider-Man film in 2 months and they're talking about a potential Phase 4. You're telling me he's not going to be there for that?
And I am Iron Man.
Okay, but maybe it didn't kill him. Maybe the arc reactor absorbed the blast, or they'll resurrect him or something. The army turns to dust, and we cut back to Tony lumbering over to sit down, half his face burnt off, unable to speak. One by one, his friends take a look at him one last time, and I sit in the theater completely awestruck and silent. The light of the arc reactor goes out, and the camera pans to the face of Tony Stark, dead. My favorite superhero, that I grew up loving, that all my friends associated with me because of how much of a fan I am, that I made countless drawings of and I had action figures of, that I spent over a decade following the story of, was dead. I sat there silent as the credits rolled, and didn't move until the screen went dark for the last time and the lights in the theater came on. My brother leaned over to me and said, "It was a pretty good movie, huh?" "Yeah," I muttered. "Yeah, it was." Now I realize that's a bit dramatic, but these stories connected with me on a deep level. And even though there were still some duds that didn't do it for me, I still pressed on because I knew my perseverance with the franchise would be rewarded. And the funny part is, most of the ones that didn't work for me were actually still beloved by fans and a financial success. Most people thought Thor Ragnarok was exactly what the franchise needed. Black Panther became a cultural icon, set box office records, and even took home some Oscars. Ant-Man and the Wasp wasn't exactly renowned for being groundbreaking, but general consensus was that it was a fun little adventure with Ant-Man. Captain Marvel, well, I guess it made $1 billion? Point is, there used to be an overall excitement for the bigger films, even if the solo projects didn't land as well. But today, I don't feel that at all. Sure, there have been some films I still really loved that they put out, like Spider-Man No Way Home, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and Deadpool and Wolverine, but those were different. Spider-Man and Deadpool were banking on returning legacy characters with arguably frail plots to hold it together. Were they a blast and crowd pleasers? Absolutely, you bet. I saw both multiple times in the theater, and they were some of my favorite movies of the years that they came out. But would they have felt this special without all that stuff? I don't know. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was a remnant from a different era that James Gunn had finished writing like 6 years prior to his actual release, after he had switched teams to DC after an unjust firing and he was finally able to come back to Marvel. It worked as a closeout to that trilogy and still managed to be very endearing. But ever since then, I haven't been going into these films with high hopes. In fact, I've come to expect nothing from them. Sometimes, like with Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, that leads to a big welcome surprise. But when Brave New World turns out to be a mediocre, overproduced dumpster fire that really has no character arc for its lead character, I feel less of a sting. Before, if there was a bad movie, my response was to put it behind me and move on because the next Avengers film would blow that one out of the water. Right now, I have zero faith in that promise still holding true. Avengers Doomsday comes out next year, and I have nothing but anxiety and dread about it. Not the same anxiety and dread I carried into Infinity War and Endgame, because that was really an outer casing for pure excitement. This is a feeling that makes me genuinely worried. Worried about the treatment of these characters, worried about the longevity of this franchise, worried about the longevity of superhero cinema in general. Everyone's already saying how tired they are of these types of films, and if they can't deliver a financial return, then what's the point if the quality is subpar? If Avengers Doomsday fails financially, Marvel is screwed. An Avengers movie that can't even crack $1 billion would be a complete embarrassment on their part. Everything around this film signals panic. Robert Downey Jr.'s stunt casting is Doom, once again breaking into 2 films to generate hype. Getting the Russo brothers back to direct to quell the fears of the audience. Getting the original X-Men cast to return for nostalgia bait. They are desperate. They know it. We know it. They know we know it. This film is going to be ugly. And what are we culminating? What are we paying off? Kang was supposed to be the villain of this film before they retitled it, and they dropped the ball on that, so now we have Doctor Doom. Most of these movies have set up sequels or teased things that have yet to be paid off. Not every character is even confirmed to return in this film, including Doctor Strange, Hulk, and freaking Spider-Man. They become too big and they don't know how to support themselves anymore. And without support, a structure inevitably collapses. The MCU isn't a collection of passion projects that expand on the stories of characters we love and intertwine into one connected universe anymore. This is a money press for the suits, and right now, they're trying to fix a paper jam in their printer. They care more about the longevity of the franchise rather than making the story count. That's why Kevin Feige said Secret Wars is going to reset the timelines of everything. They realize they're losing people because they have too much for everyone to get caught up on before the next project comes out, so they have to start over, but they still want to keep what is working. They're eventually planning to recast Iron Man and Captain America. Who's next? Black Panther? Spider-Man? Hulk? Are even any of the newer cast members safe? There's no end in sight for this franchise, and thus it feels less special. It's become a product that releases a newer model every year that is hardly different and clearly isn't inspired in any way by the people who made it. Maybe that can work for iPhones, but storytelling is a different animal. When you commoditize art and too much money is involved, you lose the passion, you lose the style, you lose everything that made it work. This is a story that will never get proper closure. It will never end. And while younger me was grateful to have all these stories being adapted to the big screen, I think I'd be more grateful if on April 26, 2019, Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige said good night and ended on a high note. Sure, we wouldn't have had some of these cool new projects, but had they just quit while they were ahead, I don't even think this topic of Marvel nosediving after they peaked would even be in discussion.